We're going to do several things today. We're going to start by talking about recent changes in the... These are going to be really exciting to you, but you do want to pay attention to them because as clerk, these are your responsibility. We're going to start by talking about the recent changes in the Book of Order that affect your congregation and things you have to do in your congregation to accommodate the recent changes in the Book of Order. Then we're going to talk about the required policies and trainings that you have to have. Hopefully by now most of those policies are in effect in your congregation, although now there needs to be an adjustment to at least one of them. And then we're going to go through the schedule of trainings you have to have, which ones are yearly, which ones are every 3 years, and how you might get those trainings. I get a lot of questions about, well, I have no idea how to do congregational boundary training, for instance. And I'm going to give you some options of how you might get them. And then we're going to talk about a whole series of property issues that if something came in to me from congregations at least 10 times during the past year, it is now on the property list. And we are going to do it with the hope that this next year, 2025, the end of 2025 and 2026, I won't get those same questions again. So that's the basic schedule for the day, or for the morning, okay? And then I will stamp the last page of books for those of you who brought them. If you didn't and you forgot to bring them, if you scan your last page and you send it to me, I will stamp it and I will send it back to you and you can print it out. All right? And that's where we're going today. Any questions in general? If there are other things yeah. All the slides will be put up on the, you'll see where they're going to be put up because at the end I'm going to talk about resources you have and it will include where these are going to be. All right, so if you have questions like that along the way, interrupt me. Easier than having to go back to it at the end. If you have questions about property and I don't know the answer, the chair of the property committee is sitting here and he'll answer them, although he doesn't know that he will. Peter Bynum is over here. He is, if you've heard his name for property issues, you can now put a face to his name. And he is the person that when you have property concerns in your church that you get in touch with. So here we go. Book of Order changes. There are 12 Book of Order changes that have been added. They have all now passed. They will take effect on July 2nd. They allow for a whole series of different things, including the local ecumenical partnership with the Episcopal Church and the Presbyterian Church. So now Episcopal priests can, in some circumstances, serve in Presbyterian churches and vice versa. Some of them are around rules of discipline, around presbytery procedures that the presbytery has to do at the end of a pastoral relationship, around ordination exams, and around how business comes to General Assembly. I'm going to assume if you're interested in those topics that you can either ask me later or look them up, because the average church person doesn't have to deal with any of those. But there are 3 that will have impacts on your congregation. And so I want to flag those for you. The first of them is G 3.0106. Here's the wording of it. All congregations shall adopt and implement the following policies. Now, as I read these, hopefully you have these policies already. It was part of what I asked for in the checklist. A sexual misconduct policy. That's been in place for a long while, so most congregations have that. I see you all shaking your head yes. A harassment policy. That's been a newer thing, but it's also because New York State also has an extra requirement on that. We'll come back to it for trainings, but you probably have one because of that. What used to be called a child youth protection policy now has an addition to it, and then you must make that this year for your policy. We added the phrase, and adults with vulnerabilities, to our youth and our child and youth protection policy. So this year, and this will be on the checklist next year, you must, as a session, make an adjustment to your policies. It's at least putting in the words, and vulnerable adults, But depending on how you've spelled out your policy, there may be other changes you need to make sure that adults with vulnerabilities are also included and protected by your policy. All right, that's the addition. And then you also have an anti-racism policy. We're going to come back to talk about these more when we look at trainings that are required. But any questions on this? So everybody needs to take that back to your congregation, and it shouldn't be a hard thing to do, but session will need to add something that makes sure that adults with vulnerabilities are now protected. Good? Okay. Next edition. Unity and diversity. The phrase that's been added is in italics. It's the unity of believers in Christ is reflected in the rich diversity of the church's membership. In Christ, by the power of the Spirit, God unites persons through baptism, regardless of race, ethnicity, age, sex. These two phrases are added. Gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, geography, or theological conviction. There's no place for discrimination in the church against any people. So if your church has an inclusion policy, or it has a welcome policy, or it references this section, you now need to be aware that when you talk about non-discrimination, that sexual orientation and gender identity are now both included. Any questions on that one? That depends on your policies, which things are in effect, whether that means changing things. For congregations that want to think this through, it may mean changing some of your language, right? You may be we're having a men's breakfast, and we'll have a women's breakfast in 3 months. Well, there are folks in congregations who identify as non-binary. Which breakfast do they go to if they want to be included? How do you make sure people feel welcomed? So, but that's depending on your policies in your congregation, how you're going to implement this. All right? I can't say to you, make sure you add these words. It's going to be up to you. What pronouns do you use when you talk in worship? Do you have pronouns that will include people who consider themselves they rather than she or he? Right. So the way you individually implement this will depend on your individual congregation. But the second thing is the denomination is asking you to think about how to make sure this is true in your congregation. Any questions on either gender identity or sexual orientation? Everybody understands? I know for those of us who are my age, these are not phrases that were around a lot when I was young. So everybody knows both of those phrases now and how they're different and what we're asking? I see David putting his hand up, telling me the mic is okay now. David? Okay. We're good there. All right, so that's number 2. Number 3, those of you who have stated supply positions, you need to pay attention to this. All right, if you have installed pastors only, you can close your ears now. But if you have a stated supply position, the Book of Order is changing what is allowed for a stated supply. You may now have a stated supply position that is 1, 2, or 3 years. So when you do your renewal next year, if you have a stated supply position, in November, December, a letter comes out from Joanna asking on behalf of COM for you to mail in your new stated supply position. When you do that, one of the things session needs to decide is, are you renewing that for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years? We don't want you to do 15 months, 17 months, right? In order for COM to be able to function with this, we need you to renew on some yearly, annual basis, at 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. But you now have that option in front of you. It used to be only 12 months. And now you don't have to go through that each time. So it's an important distinction, and a good number of our congregations are stated supply. So it's yes, please. That's true for CREs as well. CREs can be, because if they're in a pastor position, they can be renewed for a 1, 2, or 3 year term. Yes. Salary change will still be on an annual basis. Terms of call get renewed on a yearly basis, the same way as for installed pastors. But the actual contract, how long you're agreeing with somebody, and you could put, it's up to you. You could put in, for instance, we will go with whatever the presbytery recommended increase is for each of the next 2 years after that. Something like that, so you know. Yes, please. Bridge pastors come in under, basically they are the same as interim pastors. So they come in under shorter term periods because that's interim nature. So no, they're not affected in the same way. Any other questions on this one? So I think those are the 3 book of order changes that you all need to worry about, and that's it. So you're going to hear in July a lot of announcement about 12 changes. You got the ones that are going to matter to you. Rules of discipline, there are a lot of them in the rules of discipline. If one of you decides to break a denominational rule, we'll learn the others at that point. But you got the 3 that otherwise that you're going to have to deal with. So we're going to go on. Yeah, Bill. Right, and we don't have a strong definition in the Book of Order about it. I wish we did. Vulnerability can be developmental disabilities, it can be physical disabilities, it can be, the Book of Order is not defining that really well. So it's going to depend on your understanding of vulnerabilities and what your policies and programs are, how you're going to add it. Right, and but you do need to think it through. It may be that depending on your program for adults with developmental disabilities, for instance, that you do need 2 adults in a car. I don't know. It's something your sessions will need to have conversations about. Other questions, Peter? It's not new addition, but we're going to talk about the training that goes with it and a way to do the training. Other questions on these? Okay. Then policies. Whoops. So here's the quote, the section again that calls for policies and trainings. And it was made some changes at the last General Assembly that now are in effect that are going to affect us. So we're going to go through what those trainings are as well as the policies. So let's start with those. Every congregation at this point needs the following: an anti-harassment policy, a sexual misconduct policy, a child, youth, and vulnerable adult protection policy, and an anti-racism policy. All right. Those should all be in effect for your congregation. Now, trainings that go along with that. And we're going to take them in. Start with sexual harassment. All right. Every employer in New York, wait, hold on. Here are the trainings you're going to need first. Let's do this. Sexual harassment trainings, boundary trainings, that includes the 2 sexual misconduct and child abuse training together, and anti-racism training. And we're going to look at how you can do them, okay? And who has to do them. Each of these have different groups that have to do them. The denomination didn't make it easy. Each of these trainings has to show up that they've been done in your minutes. So that's why I'm making sure some of them will be things your session has to do, some of them will be things your employees have to do, some of them are things your pastor has to do. They must show up in your minutes that they've been done each year. Okay, here we go. Sexual harassment training, the first one. Every employer in New York has to provide their employees, that includes their pastors, clergy are employees under this policy, with annual sexual harassment prevention training. Every employee. This does not include independent contractors. So if you have kids that are coming to help you with your Bible camp during the summer and they're being paid a stipend because they're doing that, they are independent contractors. They are not employees. They do not need to do this training, right? If you are hiring someone to come in and fix something around your building and there's a discrete piece of work that they're doing, They are independent contractors. They are not employees. They do not have to do this training. But if you have somebody who is there on a regular basis, your office manager, your custodian or sexton, your pastor, your minister of music, or your choir director, they do have to do this training every year. Everybody got who? Yeah, all the hands go up. Go ahead. If they can show you a certificate that shows that, or they get a letter from their employee elsewhere that they've done it and it looks like it's anti-harassment training, yes, then you can count it. You would put a copy of it in the file and you would refer to it in your session minutes, right? First of all, what has to be in the training? New York State has a very clear requirement. The training has to be interactive. You can't just sit there and read something or watch a video. It has to be interactive. It has to be consistent with your church's sexual harassment policy. All right? So you need to make sure that what they're seeing in whatever training they're doing goes along with the policy you have. That means probably including making sure that every employee has a copy of that policy and has a basic understanding of it. Because if New York State says, so you report to blah, 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 and your policy says something in a video you're watching, and your policy says something else, you have to make sure that they know that your policy says you report to the pastor instead. All right. If some people have watched in the past, this has come up because people have watched employment videos that they know that a college has run or that a small office has run, and it's talking about, okay, so you report to the director of human resources. Most churches don't have directors of human resources, right? What does your policy say if there's somebody thinks they're being harassed? You need to make sure that they know how it goes with your policy. All right, if that's the kind of video you're choosing. Yes? No, what needs to be noted is anybody who is required to do this training, at all our employees, you may put like, at whatever point you finish this in a year, all our employees have done the training. Or you can put it one time by one time, right? Our pastor did the training this month. Our sexton did the training this month. However you want to do it, but by the end of each year, you must show that all your employees do the training. The assumption is that you know who is your employee and who is your independent contractor. All right? So, and the training has to have examples. Now, so where can you get the training? Most church insurance companies, including the insurance board, offer a training. All you need to do is write them and say, we want to do the training. They will send you the link. You can then send the link to each of your employees and they can watch it. It's an interactive video in that they have to click on answers to questions. And they will then, you have done the training, they will get a little certificate. It depends how you do it. It's what we use in the Presbytery office. Probably takes about an hour to do. And then you're done. They've done the training and you see the certificate and you're done. That's one option. Another option is practical resources for churches. This is a group that it will very clearly talk about it in relationship to churches. And it is a subscription that we pay for each of our congregations. Once a month, at a different time each month, they offer a webinar that will satisfy the requirement. You can go to their website, you can see the dates coming up for the year, you can ask all your employees to choose one of them, you register, and all you need to make sure is you put your churches when the person registers. So your pastor goes to register. You make sure he puts where it says, he doesn't put his home address, he puts his church's name, and that allows you to do this free. All right? Same thing for your sexton, same thing for your office manager, your bookkeeper, your treasurer, whoever you have on your staff. All right? So that's another easy way to do this. It's of the ones that are here, it's the one I'd recommend first. And they update it pretty regularly, so it's not outdated, whereas the next one I'm going to mention, it's getting a little old at this point. New York State has a training. You can go to their website. They designed this training when they came in with the requirement. It is not interactive, and so you have to put a group together to discuss it if you're going to watch their video. All right, but you may not want to do the same training each year. So you may want, your employees may say, I already did that one last year, that's really boring. So you may want to have all three of these and alternate, 1 year this, 1 year this, 1 year this. All right? But those are your options that I'm aware of for training. As I said, there are others you can get, people who watch businesses and so forth, but these actually work best for churches. The first two working better than the third one, but yeah, Bill? There is a New York City version as well. The New York City version is actually a bit better than the New York State version, but it actually references things in New York City. So, exactly. Could you hear what he said? So there's a New York City one that's actually a good video as well that you can use. You need to, at the beginning or the end, make sure to reference how it would be different for your church's policy. Okay. Are you paying them, or are you paying a organization? If you're paying an agency, it's the agency's responsibility to make sure that the people working for it are doing the work. So you don't have to do that. But if you're paying the specific individual that's been given to you by an agency instead, then you have the responsibility. Where are they getting? What are they report when they report their taxes? Who's giving them the end of year statement? Then they have to take care of it. You do not. Okay? Yeah. They do not. Unless your policy, now your individual policy could say, when you wrote your own harassment policy for the church, it could say all session members must be trained on this. Then they do. But it's not required by the Book of Order. The Book of Order requires a policy for sexual harassment, but not a training for it. Okay? New York State, however, makes it one step more complicated for us. Boundary training. Boundary training has to include both sexual misconduct and child abuse prevention. It doesn't say youth abuse prevention. It doesn't say vulnerable adult prevention. There's not a consistency in the language. I can't help it. All right? But you need to also make sure that this training happens. This is required every 3 years. And there are separate trainings required for pastors from sessions. All right, so you're going to be listing every 3 years. You're going to make sure that your pastor has done the training and that your session has done the training. Pastors will get an email from the presbytery office on the year that they have to do the training. And they must complete the training that year to make sure they're in good standing with the presbytery. All right? Sessions must note that they have completed the training. So, I'm looking at pastors. Lori, did you do the training this past year? I did that 20-hour. Yeah, the 20-hour. Peter did it too. John, did you do it? All right. All those congregations should have in their minutes their pastor has done the training, because now you're good for 3 years. If they're not in your minutes, those of you sitting here who are pastors, run back to your session and make sure they add it at the next session meeting. Okay? So that's for pastors. Yeah. They will do the training the first year they're there. They will get an invitation to that year's training. So they will have a year basically to get it done. Okay? So we're good for, yeah. If they've come from a different church, it will depend on whether the church is in this presbytery or not. So, for instance, if John, can I use you for a minute? If John Miller did the training when he was at Rye, he doesn't have to do the training again. He doesn't start all over again now that he's at Bedford. It's a cycle. If it's from outside, COM will have to decide whether the person, what they did elsewhere is satisfactory or not to what COM is requiring. All right? This is the easier part for boundary training. Okay? The other part of boundary training is session boundary training. This is newer. All right? And it can be done in one of several ways. It can be done for individual session members as they come on session. So somebody comes on to fill a vacancy. We get them the training right away. That's one option. It can be done in an intense training for all session members every 3 years. So we're going to block out one session meeting, and we're going to do nothing but the boundary training. And everybody who's on session for those at that point will get the training with the idea that you do it in 3 years again, and the next group of people will get the training who have come on in between, since you have to have the training once in the 3 years. Or it can be done in sections over the 3 years. And we're going to talk about what those sections might look like in a minute. But you've got several different options for how to do it. It must include going through your congregations, however you do it, going through your own congregation's sexual misconduct and child, youth, and vulnerable adult protection policies. Because they must know how to apply, the session has to know how to apply the training they're doing to your individual policies. Okay? So here are ways to do the training. You can create your own training. There's nothing that stops you from doing that. And if you want to do that and you want to walk through that training and either make a video for people as they come in, or you want to go through it as a session just together, that's fine. And we had a couple congregations that did that this past year. That's fine. There are other ways for people who go, I don't want to put that training together for my session. Here are some other options. Presbytery, again, has paid separately from the other thing for a training that you can use if you prefer, and you'll find it on our website. If you go to the Resources and Trainings for Sessions page, and I'll show you about that again towards the end, but there's a separate page that's got nothing but resources for sessions on our website under our e-learning portal. And you go there and you look down towards the left, you will see that one of the things is that, I don't know if you can see it here. Can you see it? Under session materials, the third one down is boundary training for sessions. You can click on that, and that will take you to the paid trainings that we've come up with for you to use. They're, again, through practical resources for churches, and they're on demand. So you just fill out the registration form to access them. For whatever piece of the training you're going to use, there are 5 pieces. You can do them all at once, or you can do them little by little. Putting down your congregation's name, and they are there for you. So they can be done in the 5 short segments, or they can be done in one long segment, depending on how you want to do it. The sections are, the videos that you watch with them are called Shared Shepherding, Leadership Covenant, Healthy Communications for Leaders, Pastoral Boundaries, and Child Protection Policy. They're each about 15 minutes. If you click on the page that I showed you on our website, there's a little summary of what each of them is. And you can then do them, if you're not doing them all at once, you can do them in one of several ways. You can send out the link to your session members ahead of time and say, before you come to the next session meeting, would you watch the Healthy Communications for Leader video? And then we're going to discuss it for 10 minutes at the beginning of a session meeting. That's one option. Or you can watch the video together and then discuss it. There are video questions that are provided by practical resources to use. So you don't have to think up the questions, but you watch the video and then you have the discussion. All right. Those are ways to get through the boundary training for session. Any questions with that? Good. So now I want to make it one step a bit more complicated in that, and those of you who have been in my trainings in past years have heard me say this because it's a New York wrinkle, a New York weirdness. When you look at our policy of our denomination, there is a policy that says that every person, basically, but every ruling elder, deacon, church school teacher, there's your question, right? Church school teacher, pastor, etc., are under our policy in our denomination mandated reporters. If you suspect that a child is being abused or an adult is being abused, a vulnerable adult is being abused, you must report it. All right? That is a requirement. You are a mandated reporter under our book of order. All right? Now here's the New York wrinkle. Unlike most states, except for New York and Louisiana, where every other state, for instance, clergy or ruling elders are mandated reporters in their state as well. New York, however, does not consider clergy or ruling elders mandated reporters. So if you suspect child abuse, let's say, you must call and say, I am a voluntary reporter in New York, or you're reporting in the wrong place. And we have had pastors who have been sued for reporting in the wrong category. So I want you to pay careful attention to this, right? You are, unless you are, how many of you, for instance, are teachers? Got any teachers? All right, so you're a mandated reporter for a different reason, right? That's a whole different thing. I'm not telling you to call and say you're voluntary. If you are a doctor or you are a teacher or you're a therapist or whatever categories, you'll know you're mandated. I'll take your question in a minute, Deb. Just give me 1 second. You'll know you're a mandated reporter in those ways. Then you call New York State and you say, I'm a mandated reporter. But if you are not in one of those categories, despite the book of order saying you're mandated, when you call New York, you are a voluntary reporter. Deb. You're an RN, so you are a mandated reporter. You're a mandated reporter. So you need to keep this in mind when you're helping people train for what our boundary policies are. You need to keep in mind that people need to understand that distinction. All right? The church that had the most recent problem no longer exists, but we had an ongoing problem. A pastor had a very hard time because the book of order said they were mandated. They called and they said, which line? Push 1 if you're a mandated reporter, push 2 if you're a voluntary reporter. And she pushed 1. She's a mandated reporter under the book of order. And it became a big deal, and she was sued and the presbytery supported her financially and with a lawyer and so forth. But it's a big deal. Yeah. Clergy, there are cases in civil courts that allow that Presbyterian ruling elders are recognized as ordained. So in most states, it says ordained folks are mandated reporters. It doesn't say folks, but it uses a list of categories. And that would therefore include ruling elders. New York, it does not. New York, when clergy were going to be added and ordained folks were going to be added, there was a lot of lobbying against it by one religious organization, and we don't need to worry about what it was, but we are an exception to the rule across the country. So you need to be aware of that. Okay? That's a harder question, and I wish there was a clear-cut answer to that. The way it's worded is if this isn't something that's in keeping with your duties. And so you need to figure out, do you feel this is in keeping with your duties? If you're a teacher and let's say you're a teacher during the week and you're teaching church school in the weekend, right? Does that feel to you like it's in keeping with your duties? If it does, yes. And I've never seen anybody, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but I've never heard of anybody who is a mandated reporter during the week who reports something on Sunday. I know of several people who have reported on Sunday as a mandated reporter, and I've never heard of anybody having a problem there. So my hunch is you can say, yes, you can report that way, even if it's something connected with the church. But it's a hunch. I haven't gone through every case in New York, so I don't want you to think I've... And in all the trainings that exist for folks like my job across the country that church and tax law, for instance, do wonderful trainings, but they're doing them for the 48 states that are out there that have the other law. So I don't know the answer to that in more detail, but I think you're probably safe to be a mandated reporter. Yes. Yes, deacons are also voluntary reporters. Good question. Church school teachers, if they're not mandated elsewhere, are voluntary reporters. They need to know the training that goes with your policy. So the answer would be at least a modified form, if not the full thing. It's a good question. Other questions? Okay. Then next, anti-racism training. You now all should have anti-racism policies in effect, or you're getting close to them. 1 or 2 congregations wrote me and said, we've written it, but we haven't passed it yet. All right. So for pastors, this training must be done every 3 years. This is the first year that such a training is required. So for our presbytery, for our denomination, all pastors are required to do that training this year. There was a training that was offered about a month and a half ago. There is a training coming up this May 27th for pastors, and then there will be one in September. But all pastors must do one of these 3 trainings. It's a day-long training this time. And then there will be, again, in 3 years. Your session minutes should make sure that your pastor has done the training. So you should be asking, doesn't matter if they're stated supply, bridge pastor, installed, designated, I don't care what they are. They have to do the training. So you should be asking your pastor, whoever they are, have you done the training? If not, are you signed up for May or September? And when you finish it, would you let me know? Because I need to then put it into my minutes. The denomination requires the training. The presbytery has said, COM has said that since, you may remember we voted a presbytery anti-racism policy very recently. And part of that policy says that, again, every 3 years this training is there. And the Committee on Representation, along with approval from Committee on Ministry, has said that because this is the first year, we're going to get all pastors on board this year. And so there are 3 trainings offered. If pastors, to the question that I know is coming, if pastors have done this training in some other aspect of their life, they can send in a certificate, again, to CORE and COM and ask, will this take the place of that? And they will decide. So pastors have to do that training. Michelle? Doesn't matter. They have to get the training in. If they're a member of the Hudson River right now as a pastor, they have to get, as a minister, they have to get the training in. So you should still have them down. So Lynn will tell. I can look it up too, but I just didn't put it down. All right. The May one is in Calvary, in Newburgh. And the first one was in Yorktown, and I don't remember where the third one is. For sessions, it's going to depend on your policy, whether you need a training or not. And I have now looked through the policies, and we have everything from, we're going to try to figure out this year what our projects are that are going to make sure this becomes a reality in our congregation, to really detailed, we are going to make sure session members have looked at the following issues. Right? Well, if you've got a policy that says session members have looked at the following issues, you need to make sure there's some training there that's covering those issues. So for the session, it's entirely up to what your policy is. It doesn't need to show up except for your pastor. Right. But all 3 of them need to show up in one way or another. If you have no pastor and you have no employees, then that's a different story. But if you have a pastor or you have employees, or you're going to need, and everybody needs the boundary training. Okay? No matter what. Okay. Going to switch gears now. All right. We're going to move towards property and property issues. The first thing I want to talk about is capital loans. All right. When I go into congregations and we're doing holy cows, one of the things I hear again and again is we're having a really hard time keeping up with our buildings. All right, and we're going to talk about two different ways the property committee has addressed that in a minute. But one of them is capital loans. All right, so the presbytery is offering, if congregations have not done this, a one-time no-interest loan for $25,000. It gets paid back over 5 years in equal increments. That basically, it has to be the session that approves it. And you fill out the form. It can't be for more than 20% of your congregation's annual budget. That's to make sure you do have a way to pay it back. You fill out the form. The form will go to the property committee and to the finance committee. Property committee is looking at the work you're going to do, what capital work you're going to do with it. Finance committee is looking at, can you pay back the loan? If you pay the first 4 years in time, and you are in good standing with the presbytery, then the 5th year may be forgiven completely. All right, so then it becomes a loan grant. The word is may. You have to ask to have it forgiven, and you must be in good standing with the presbytery. If you're not putting in your minutes, if your pastor's not doing the boundary trainings and there are a whole series of different readings. You've heard me say in good standing again and again when I've been talking about things, right? Then you're not going to have the 5th year forgiven. All right? But those are the starting points. So if you haven't taken a capital loan and there's work you need to do, Peter Bynum is waiting for your applications. He would love to have them. And the presbytery is serious. We want to help congregations in this way. So if your building needs work, we're not going to charge you any interest on this. You can do that work. All right? Please take advantage of this. We also, as a denomination, have PILP loans, Presbyterian Investment and Loan Program loans. And you need to be aware of them. Deb, can I use Haverstraw for a minute? So Haverstraw, as well as doing a capital loan, has just taken a PILP loan for some of the work they're doing here. I know because I just notarized the form a week or two ago, and it has gone through. And you should be hearing from Ginger, if you haven't already, any minute. So the PILP loans are for larger loans. You want to do construction, you need to do repairs and renovations, you need to do building, you want to buy a building. It's not most of our congregations, but maybe you want to. Accessibility work, energy efficiency work, different little PILP loan, less interest on the PILP loan if you want to put, for instance, solar on your roof. It's a very low interest loan. Refinancing existing loans you have at banks generally charge more than PILP does. So you can refinance them. All right? You need to be aware that that's there. And because of the money that we keep with the foundation and with the denomination, you get a better deal at this. So you need to keep aware of it. The presbytery guarantees these. So they come through our finance committee and to our council, and they get approved in that way because we're going to be guaranteeing them. And so just like you have to make sure you have a way to pay them back, we have to make sure that if you were to go belly up and close your church, we have a way to pay them back. And so we track them and we guarantee them. And that's part of the reason PILP can do these at such a low interest rate. But they're there for you, so please pay attention to them. They need to be approved by our property committee, again, for the work you're doing, and by our finance committee, again, for the financial part of it, to make sure that it makes sense. These PILP loans. That's why I want you all to be aware of it. It's a very good example. And you may have more than one PILP loan, right? If you take one for one project and then something else comes along, you can take another one. They're not limited in that way. So please be aware of that. We're going to look at these property issues now. Are we ready? Manses, leasing and acquiring property, selling property, cemeteries, and historic landmarks. Here we go. So for each of these, there are 4 areas that you need to consider if you're doing them. All 4 of these. You need to consider the federal requirements around reporting and tax exemption, etc. The New York Religious Corporation law requirements, which are very specific in some cases to Presbyterians. There are sections in New York Religious Corporation law that only apply to Presbyterian churches. The Book of Order requirements, and then the individual presbytery requirements. And so we're going to try to pick up some of these along the way. And you will hear me, when we talk about manses, jumping back and forth between these, or cemeteries, or but you need to factor them all in each time you're dealing with one of these issues. So manses. New York State says, first of all, I should say, at least 40 of our congregations have manses. So this is an issue in a lot of our congregations. And in New York State, the understanding of a manse is that a manse is a piece of church-owned property that is the residence of your officiating clergy. All right? If you have a manse, you have to attest to the fact that that's true every year when you fill out RP 462. It's a form that the church fills out every single year. And one of the things it asks is your manse being occupied by your officiating clergy person? All right? So if it's a manse, the answer technically is, what's the answer that you're putting down on the form? Yes. All right. Now I know in this presbytery, Peter knows at this point too, because he's smiling as I say this, that there are churches that are not using their manses in this way. All right? And so we need to talk about them. All right? If your church is not using your manse in this way because you are in between pastors, but you are actively searching, you can put that down on the form. That's one option. If your church is no longer using your manse as a manse, but you're using it for other church mission, you should shift it from being, and you're never going to go back to using it as a manse, it's clear. You should shift it from being a manse to being church property. And it's still tax exempt, right? Church property is tax exempt. But you need to switch it. It's no longer your officiating clergy person living there. It's now your food pantry, or it's now your daycare center, or it's now whatever it is. You need to switch it. If your manse is no longer your manse because you have somebody else living in it, and we have churches where that's the case, you should be paying taxes on it. You are not using it as a manse. So if it's like an interim is there, and so when the next permanent pastor is hired, they're going to be back, you can just put down, we're in an interim, but we're searching for our next permanent pastor. And so right now, instead, we have a feeding program in there, or we have, it's being used to shelter people who would be on the street otherwise, or whatever it is. If it's an ongoing thing, a longer period of time than that, we anticipate this is the next 15, 20 years, let's say, instead. As long as you're using it for church business and mission in some way, you should shift it to church property. Again, you get the same tax exemption, but and what you need to do then, when you're dealing with that piece of property, like any other piece of property, when you have other groups in your church or using it in a specific way, is to make sure it's clear that it's part of the mission of your church, right? If it's being used, we're going to talk about a sexton exemption in a minute, and that's a different thing. But generally, no. Otherwise, no, it's not it's not manse. It's not a manse. So your manse is an investment. I wish I could wave a wand and have every congregation understand this. Your manse is an investment. It needs to be kept up, just as you would any other investment you have, right? And so because of that, you need to make sure what's happening there regularly. Now, I know pastors say, I don't want anybody walking through my manse. It's my home. But you still need to do it. I don't care if the pastor doesn't like it. All right? Because you need to, otherwise what we're seeing again and again is long-term pastors move out, And there's a huge, and I see congregations with, there's a huge amount of work that suddenly happens. And the pastors think, well, I'm doing the congregation a favor. I won't point out that 2 of the 3 bathrooms no longer work, and that the ceiling has fallen down here, and that I won't point that out. But it has to be fixed for the next person going in there. And suddenly, instead of being what would have been a $5,000 repair here and a $3,000 repair there, because it's taken so long, is now, I got to come up with $100,000. So please insist. You do it at a convenience of a time for the pastor, but insist that you get the session or the property committee or some group in your congregation walks through the manse on a regular basis. Deb. So that's a good basis for the next thing, which is that the manse condition, when you're in between pastors, the property committee comes in and inspects the manse to make sure if all your appliances are from 1900, your manse is not going to pass the property committee inspection. It's just not. All right? So the property committee will send someone, and we will also ask you to have an outside inspection for which the presbytery will pay part of. So you get both of those inspections in between pastors. We would love to do those for you on a more regular basis if you have long-term pastors so that you don't have surprises at the end. And again, if you want that, if you contact Peter Bynum sitting here, we will get you an inspection in between so that you know, basically, here's what we would be suggesting now if you were updating your manse. Lori. Right, we have several congregations that are searching for pastors, and Lori's on COM, she knows this, so we're trying to track down those congregations they're saying, well, we're getting ready to call somebody. Well, the property committee has asked, 4 times, 5 times? We'd like to come and inspect your manse. And we get no answer. You can't have the pastor start until your manse has been approved. So, Duna. On a regular basis, it depends on how old the building is and what kind of problems might develop, but at least on a regular basis, if not once a year, once every 2 years or so. And you want somebody who can walk through and actually knows what to look for. You're not looking like, I would walk and I'd say, I don't like that color of the stove. It's not the kind of thing we're looking at. What the things that you're looking for. So if you have somebody who in your session who's trained to do that kind of thing, that would be the person you want to walk through. In some cases, I've been amazed, for instance, a session has never seen the manse. Not a member, I moderated a session meeting, I don't know, maybe 8 years ago now, where we were talking about the next pastor coming. And I said, what condition is your manse in? It's okay. Everything's fixed up? Well, yeah, we guess so. Well, which of you has seen it to make sure? Not a single session member had been in the manse, ever. So you own this building. You need to keep it up. It's your property. Yes, it's the pastor's home, but it's your ongoing investment. So please keep it up. No, when I'm saying the property committee here, I mean the Presbytery Property Committee. The Presbytery Property Committee. Your church may have a Buildings and Grounds Committee. It may just have the session. It may, depending on the structure you have. There is also a sexton exemption, which is that a person who is living in a building attached to or next to the church property, who is required, part of their job is to do the upkeep and the repairs of the property, right? That person, that housing can also be an exemption. I'm not talking about a third party paying rent coming in. That's not a legal exemption. But I'm talking about somebody who's part of their pay for doing their work is living on that property, and they're going to go around and they're going to make sure all the lights are out at night and the heat is on the right temperature and they mow the lawn or whatever it is they do. Their housing can be an exemption. Same way as a pastor's. Yeah, John. No. It's just you can exempt it, and then when you do your regular form that you fill out that you're often sent by your town, it would go. The question would be, has anything changed? And if you've now suddenly moved somebody into that, you would put down, we now have a sexton living in blah 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 blah. And if you no longer have that, you need to put that has been changed. If you hire an outside service, let's say, instead to do it, and the service comes in now, what was an exemption needs to be reported as a change on that form. Are we good on manses? Okay, now, leasing or selling or acquiring property. The Book of Order requires written permission from the presbytery to do any of these things. Acquire or sell a piece of property, encumber property, that means a mortgage or an easement, and that includes changing how a piece of property is owned, right? So you decide you want to put an easement. I'd like to consider putting a cell phone tower on my property. I want to give the neighbor a right to run electrical lines through my property. I want to give away our parking spaces because we don't really need them anymore, right? Those require presbytery approval. All right. It says denominational, but it says through the presbytery. If you are leasing your property for more than 5 years, that requires presbytery approval. If you are leasing your property for purposes of worship, so you've got another worshiping community that says, can we come and share your space? That, even if it's for a year, 6 months, 3 months, that requires presbytery approval. All right? So what does that mean? Under New York State, I'll get your question in 1 second. Under New York State, under Religious Corporation Law, Section 12, the first 3 of these also require court approval. So you're going to sell a piece of property, acquire a piece of property, if that's where you're going, Michelle, doesn't require court approval. All right. But sell a piece of property, you got to get approval from the court. You want to lease for 5 years or more, you got to get approval from the court. You want to put an easement on a piece of property, you got to get approval from the court. And one of the things the court will say when you go to get that approval is, please show us something that says that your presbytery has given you permission to do this. And what you do when you need that is you write it, assuming that the property committee has signed off on it, and the presbytery, if you're selling a piece of property, has signed off on it, I then write a letter certifying the presbytery approved this on this date. All right? But those all require presbytery approval and court approval. Yeah. If it's longer than 5 years and it's an automatic renewal, it's not a 5-year lease. But if it's an option and both parties have an option out, then there have been court cases. I actually know there have been court cases now. We were looking at this for another reason. But there have been court cases now that say that if it's an automatic renewal on one side but not on the other side's part, it's more than a 5-year lease. And so it does require presbytery approval. Right. But if it doesn't give the church an opt-out, it's considered more than a 5-year lease. And so what do you do if you need any of those things? You get the information on it to the property committee. Emily Monk will write you and say, I need this document, and this document, so the property committee can look at it. And the property committee will come back to you and say, the property committee, Peter will say this probably more eloquently than I could, but the property committee wants to be helpful. We're not trying to stop you from doing things. We're trying to stop you from having problems when you do them. And so we've got people on there who know real estate law. We've got people on there who are real estate agents who know what to look for in property. We've got people on there. And so we're trying to say to you ahead of time, here are the things you should consider. Please consider these and how they're worded and get back to us on it. Because we know what some of the problems that can come up are otherwise. So this is, while the Book of Order requires the property committee to look at it, we really think we can be helpful on these issues. And if you're entering a lease that's a 1-year lease and you want the property committee to look at it because the property committee knows what's come up in churches, we're happy to do that too, right? So, but these things require you to get permission from the presbytery. Without them, the contracts are not valid. So, Dottie. If you are, another worshiping group is worshiping in your space, and they are worshiping there for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months on an ongoing basis. I'm not talking about they're having a wedding or they're having a funeral, but this is an ongoing relationship. You must get the property committee's permission. The denomination requires it. And you know how to reach Peter, so there you go. Yes? Parking spaces are leases, and so they need to, if they meet these requirements, they need to go through the presbytery. And I'm going to say, when you're leasing, maybe I should say it here instead, when you're leasing a piece of property, you should be leasing it to a not-for-profit that's in keeping with your mission. You should be making sure that what you're leasing it for is what it costs you to use that space. So it should be basically, it's costing me this for heat, it's costing me this for electrical, it's costing me this for wear and tear, but nothing more than that. Or you must report that additional income, because otherwise you will risk losing your tax-exempt status. So if you are renting parking spaces, for instance, the income from parking spaces, unless you're renting it to a not-for-profit who's part of your mission because they've got a daycare center in your building or so forth, that's taxable, and you need to be paying tax on it, or you're risking your it's not a great thing to be doing to begin with, but if you're going to do it, I get you may need it for income, you need to be paying tax on it. Right. So you need insurance. You need to make sure that the organizations don't assume they're not-for-profits. Make sure they're not-for-profits, right? We have churches that for years have had nursery schools in there, right? And then the nursery school has changed hands, and they assume that the nursery school that was going in was also a not-for-profit. And it wasn't. And it's caused problems, so that's how I know it existed. So you need to check. Well, a nursery school can be a for-profit or a not-for-profit, right? A children's acting program can be a for-profit or a not-for-profit. A yoga group can be a for-profit or a not-for-profit. You need to check that. That's part of if you're entering. And again, you can only charge. This is not, churches don't like this, but this is the law. What can you charge? You can charge what it costs you for having that group in the space. You can't charge more, and you must be able to substantiate that cost. So if it costs you for heat for a month, $1,000, and it costs you for electricity, $1,000, and it costs you for wear and tear, $1,000, what can you charge a group that's using that space for that amount? $3,000. You can't charge $10,000 unless you're going to pay taxes on it. And it cannot go into your general budget so that it covers pastor's salary or sexton or anything like that. You have to keep records. This is what it's costing me. Why are you having that group in and it's still under your tax exemption? Because it's a mission of the church. And so you're not supposed to be making money on it. It's supposed to be helping, you're breaking even, but you're not supposed to be making money on it. Everybody with me? I know this is unpopular, but it's the reality. Okay, cemeteries. All right. One of the things we've heard again and again and again from churches that have cemeteries, and we know that there are at least 20 church cemeteries at this point, is cemeteries are really expensive for us to keep up. We can't pay to have them plowed, and we can't pay to have the grass cut, and it's killing our church to have cemeteries, our cemetery. But we want to keep it working, and we want to make sure it's nice for people who are going to have people buried there, and we're really concerned about that. So because of that, the expenses of running those cemeteries are causing a lot of stress for our churches. And because of that, the presbytery would like to help you in the following way. We would like to help you set up a cemetery association for those cemeteries that you have, a separate cemetery association for the cemeteries that would therefore become ultimately a separate organization, right? As part of that, we will help you with legal costs. We want to figure out, we're trying now, we've worked with two churches, Peter, in one county, in Orange County so far, to learn. Each county has different rules for cemetery associations. It would be nice if New York was consistent, but New York is not consistent at anything. So we're trying to figure out what the rules are county by county in cemeteries, and we would like to help you with your legal costs and getting the things going so that you can get a cemetery association that will work well, that will allow your cemeteries to function so that people like you who love your church and want to be buried in its cemetery can be buried in the same cemetery, but it won't be eating up all your money. So if you're interested in doing this, please let us know. As I said, we're willing to partner with you to make sure that this happens. So, and we're trying to learn county by county. And now we've got to start on Orange County Cemetery. So if you're in Orange County, we have a general idea of who to contact and what to do. If you're in other counties, we're trying to learn. So let us know that you'd like to do that with your church cemeteries. And they can be next to the church. They can be somewhere else. As long as they're church cemeteries, we are willing to work with you on doing that. So we want you to be aware of that. Historic landmark status. No church property should be included in any application for federal or state or district or local historic district or historical landmark status until the presbytery has been afforded an opportunity to review the application to assess the implications of the status and has approved the application by an affirmative vote. Again, that's in keeping with those sections of the Book of Order. But there are real benefits to this and real disadvantages to it, and we want to be able to help you weigh them. Among the benefits are, first of all, it sounds really nice. We're on the historic register, and so maybe people will come and visit our church more than some other church, right? It sounds great. It's got a nice feeling to it. The other is there are some small grants that are available, and you may be able to take advantage of them, and we want you to be able to do that if that's the case. There are some limitations too. Among the limitations are depending on the grant and depending on the status, the ability to make changes in the property. And that may mean, well, you had 18th century windows, they have to stay 18th century windows with 18th century panes. And yes, it's more expensive to find that kind of glass now, but that's what you've committed to when you've put your church on the... So we want you to be aware of the cost of them. Your ability to make improvements. You can't, for instance, on a building designated that way, you may not be able to put solar on, or you may not be able to put energy efficient windows on, so we want you to be aware of that. And it also slows down if you decided you wanted to sell, let's say, your manse that's on the historic register. It slows down the opportunity, for instance, for transferring ownership in those ways. So please, again, everybody thinks it's just nice. I'll put us on the historical register. It depends on what register you're putting yourself on, what the implications are. Let the property committees sort it out with you and help you. Yeah. And so we want you, when something like that comes up, let us sort through with you. Yes, it's going to take longer. But again, in the future, that's what we're trying to do, is help you understand what the ramifications both ways are. Deb? Right, you can be recognized without being on one of these organizations. And there are times we have approved being in one of these organizations. It depends on the situation. But you do need to try to know what your sort of, Bill's comment about what you're committing yourself to, and it may be worth it because you're glad to be on it. It may not be. I want to do two more things before we stop, and these are to first of all point you to training resources. There is a section of the Presbytery website that's called e-learning portal, and under it there is a section. So that's what I've put the address up for. There is a section that is called Resources and Trainings for Clerks of Session. The slides for this will go up there next week when Casey puts them up, and if this turns out okay, the video will go up there. But there are also a series of other trainings, including if you're a new clerk, basic trainings. Here's how you do your rolls. Here's how you do your register. Here are the things you need to do each year. Here are the things you need to do every 5 years, etc. So feel free to watch those. There's a whole section for different clerk type of topics. And then there's also a section for sessions. And those include things like Deb and I put together a video that's training for new elders. You can have your new elders watch it as a way to do most of their training. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. All right. So, and there are other things that are resources there for you. So please check out those sections and make sure your session's aware of them. And then finally, this is something, Casey just left the room again, but Casey ran across the other day that I thought some of you might have fun with. There is now, under AI, what is called a Polity Pal. If you go to this website and you decide that you are interested in asking a polity question, here we go. Presbyterian Church Polity Pal. You can put in a question that you want to know, and it will give you the answer according to the Book of Order and general law. So if you want to know, how do I go into executive session? You can type in executive session, and it will give you the rules of executive session according to Robert's Rules on the Book of Order. So if there's anything you want to know, what do I need to know about? This is a new denominational thing. It supposedly is going to be amazing. They just announced it 2 days ago. Those of you who like to play with AI type things, here's your chance to try it out. If you're uncomfortable with it, if you want to call me instead to ask the question, that's fine. But for those of you who like to be right on the edge of cutting technology, here's the denominational attempt. I hope you have fun with it.